Hello and welcome to another episode of New Game Plus. It is an interesting one today because we're discussing endings and not necessarily happy endings because the games that we're covering are Metro, Rage, but we're also covering the end of BAM 11. So Battle Arena Melbourne 11 has ended and we are covering the end of that. You see, there was a segue in all that and I know we got there in the end, but thank you for joining me on that journey. But we continue on our journey into some post-apocalyptic wastelands. For now though, something completely different.
But the annoying thing is that Aaron Black players, they want to land that forward four, man. They want to go ham. True. But, man, that interactable, all the interactables that allow you to, like, jump out of the corner or jump off something have terrible recovery now. In MKX, they were god tier. In this game, not so much.
Yeah, I think they wanted interactables to be... Ooh. Oh.
Convert? Oh, my man's input is way too clean on the sticks right now. Yep. There we go, he's got no offensive meter. Oh my god. Oh, he tried the back two, but that's okay. There we go. Finally we start seeing something coming from Aaron Black. Oh sorry, Googie's Aaron Black. Forward, no. Yet again, block.
Down two, that's it. That's it.
Yikes, my boy. The crazy thing is, right, is that what you notice is that Waz is one of the players where he does take the throw. He takes that page from Street Fighter 5, take the throw. He would much rather that than eating a crushing blow or a counter hit from, like, you know, Aaron Black 2-1-2-1-2, for instance.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Here we go. This is what I want to see. The more lane playstyle, because at this full screen, right, Shadow Kick's not a factor. He walks forward a little bit, he does the projectile counter, he chucks out the acid.
They're all highs, what's he doing?
Googie just is not ready for this Jade.
He's not ready
for this Jade. He's not ready for that, you know, insane zoning playstyle. Yikes, this is looking pretty clean, boys, for Waz to take this 3-0.
See, Waz was happy to sit full screen. He's not taking any damage over time. He's not in the acid. He's not getting counter zoned.
Yeah,
This is how the matchup plays out. He just chucks the acid down. And he steps back, that's it. What's he gonna do? What's his approach? Forward four, but that has been a non-factor in this matchup. And once you take that away from him, he's really struggling. This is looking pretty hospital.
That was god tier. Can't confirm off that.
This is game. He's 15 seconds to make something happen.
Yeah, this is it. And Wazminator, DS Waz is going to take it. Your grand final set 3-0
Now again, that has been out for a little while is Metro Exodus, the latest game from the Metro series. And the other two have been fantastic linear experiences. This one lends itself to a little bit of a different style of gameplay. So, you know, obviously the previous ones were kind of set in the metro of Russia. The wars happened, the bombs have gone off. It was kind of a, you know, the joke was always that it was the Russian Fallout. And I think there's some element of truth to that. Like, as much as Fallout has been a stylized version of, you know, the post-apocalyptic wasteland, Metro had a down-to-earth quality to it. You know, it was basically whatever food was inside the tunnels at the time is what became the food source for everyone. It really adds to that claustrophobia. This game, as per the name implies, Exodus, they leave Moscow. And so learning the individual story elements of that is like the driving force of the story, but it basically means that you end up in a bunch of different sandboxes. So you stop at various parts along this trip to basically like a conservator, like a new Garden of Eden, if you will. So there's like a walled garden protected from everything else, and you're trying to escape to it. So you stop at all these different areas for different reasons. You interact with a cult in one, you interact, all of these different places have their own unique story to tell. And it does a good job of doing that kind of odyssey almost. And the biggest issue I would say with the game is that it's trying to do these open world elements. It's still, like, you can still tell that it's a smaller sandbox. And that's not inherently bad. I mean, the one thing that I would say this game has over Fallout, for example, is that the enemies in this are far more terrifying. There might only be one or two of them, but they're far more terrifying. Whereas, like, you know, you come across a Deathclaw in Fallout, yeah, you're dead, but there's not that many Deathclaws, and you can always level up to kind of fix that problem. Not something that you can do in Metro. My only bugbear of what is an otherwise fantastic game, and whether it's the best in the series is a different conversation, but my biggest bugbear is the the translation and the way that they've managed to do the dubs. And I'm actually so annoyed / bothered with it that I've decided to bring Matt in to discuss exactly this topic. Now,
Gee, thanks.
you know, okay, but you know what I'm talking about here. So you understand, you played the game in Russian.
Yes.
To avoid this.
Well, it took me about, I think, 20 minutes of the entire game until I went, nah, straight into Russian, because 4A games are Ukrainian. And I thought it'd be a better service to change to Russian to get the proper inflections.
Thanks, Putin.
Oh,
Put it in Crimean next time.
chill out, my dude.
Crimea River.
Yes, so I thought it'd be a better service to go, okay, we'll get the proper inflections, get the proper kind of context and dialect, and it's all the more better for it.
Yeah, and I've no doubt that it is. And this is the thing. So I played it in English just because I was like, cool, I'll test it out, see how it goes. And the worst part of it was that they have these obviously Russian actors, or at least pretending to be Russians. If they're pretending, they do a pretty good Russian accent, right? But it really starts to jar because they start using these American idioms. And whether that's a case of I'm so used to growing up on watching translations which are based on England English as opposed to American English, or not, it really doesn't fit. Like, they're using colloquialisms that perhaps they wouldn't have even heard or would have heard in passing. And that's how apparently their conversational speech is. Like the little girl that you meet at one of the things, she says mommy, mommy. And I'm like, well, no. And so much so it annoyed me because on the version I didn't realize how I could scroll down all the way and then click it one more to get to Russian. I put in Japanese. And it was a better game instantly in Japanese. It was a better game in Japanese because of how annoying these things were. And I think it's a trend. So you have Crackdown was another game that had it where it was, you've got these, you had the main character who speaks to you is obviously from the subcontinent. She's Indian, Pakistani, I can't remember exactly where. But, so she has this heavy accent from those regions. But then she's like throwing out these American cowboy idioms.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, it's because it's not how, it doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And it annoys me more and more as time goes on.
Yeah. You did mention that you were playing in Japanese. So first of all, shut up, weeaboo. Second of all, I feel that, certain inflections, I feel it's more of a case of the developers or the dubs pandering towards an American audience, which again, the brunt of their intended target audience is there. So they want to try and go for that. But at the same time, I feel it's very similar to the way the Japanese went with their development and their dubbing about maybe 10, 15 years ago, where they wanted to try and again, a lot of the developers in Japan have identified this and admitted it, saying we tried to make our games appeal more towards the American audience. That failed, but we only started succeeding until we started kind of just doing what we do, and then that was where the appeal came from. And you'll find that a lot of developers, people from the Ukraine, people from Poland, like CD Projekt Red, if they do their own thing, that's fine. Now, there's the French developers are starting to do that a lot. A lot of good games coming out from France at the moment. Games like Fury, A Plague Tale Innocence, which has come out,
French.
come out recently as well. And that's got the same problem as well. I changed that to French 10 minutes in and made the inflections, made the dialect a lot better. But one of the big anomalies actually is Life is Strange, but it's got its own thing going because it's trying to go for Americana and it actually nails it.
But and that in and of itself is fine. When Terry Crews shows up in Crackdown and he's throwing out all these American cowboy, it's Terry Crews. He's the loud, bombastic American.
He's in his element.
Yes. He's playing President Comanche. You know what I mean? So it's it makes sense. So it's cool.
Sense.
That makes sense. But I think it is that thing of I would rather literal translate. I mean, this is an old joke from level 3 days, right? This is how long ago we're talking. That Aniki means boss. If you want to trigger me, Aniki means boss because Yakuza 3 translated Aniki directly as boss. They didn't assume that people would understand the inflection of brother, like older brother being someone they look up to and having that esteem. So they kind of talk down to us, and I think that's what annoys me about it is you don't have to change it into these idioms to try and make it more approachable. I know going in what I think, but again, Australian market, a game that does well sells 50,000.
I think one of the big changes as well, especially, and this is very relevant to this current conversation, is that localizations become a lot more lucrative, especially in the Japanese spectrum of things, where the reason why Sega bought out Atlas in the first place was to bring that top-tier localization from Persona and bring it to stuff like projects like Binary Domain, products like Yakuza, for example, and really play on their strengths. And I hope French developers do that in the future, even like 4A Games, developers in Ukraine, Russia, China even. I really hope that they really kind of learn what Japan learned 10 years ago and really kind of bring it full force because, again, more games coming from different regions and really kind of harnessing what makes their culture great, it's going to make things fascinating.
So one of the things that happened recently as we film this is Battle Arena Melbourne 11, which is Australia's biggest fighting game tournament. It's Australia's biggest open entry esports tournament. So there's lots of great things about BAM 11. I figure one of the best things I could potentially do is bring down one of the old guard of CouchWarriors who help organise it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I've been doing it for 11 years.
So this is Daniel Chlebowczyk, strategy manager for CouchWarriors at the moment. I mean,
Yes.
you've been through a few roles, of course. You've been president at points. You've been
Yep.
lots of different things. How did you feel about the vibe of BAM 11?
Oh, it's the vibe is the same, which is energetic, welcoming, hype as hell, but elevated again. Just more people, and the tournaments were bigger.
And that is probably the big takeaway. So obviously we had Mortal Kombat was a launch game, which had its own specialised area, was a big sponsor of the tournament as well. We also had Smash Brothers, which hit 330-something entrants.
340.
And then we had Tekken, which hit 260 or 270 or something like that.
258, so close to 260, yep.
So in and of themselves, they are huge numbers for an Australian tournament. Like,
Yeah,
I
both
think
of
that,
the biggest tournaments ever for each of those games.
And it's so crazy to think that, you know, we've gotten to this point. Like I remember, you know, for many years, like kind of the record stood at just over 200. Then we hit that kind of thing. Now we're hitting these record numbers on not only one game but two games at the same event, and still a lot of the other big games are still pulling these huge pools as well. So it's been so interesting to see the growth of like these existing games and communities, and that's built off the back of those communities themselves.
Yeah, and I think the elevation has gone across the board, even looking at small games. Like my old favourite, Dead or Alive, hit 40. Soul Calibur was like 43. Yeah. And you look at Mortal Kombat, which has, as a community, the NetherRealm Studios players, the NRS players,
yep.
have been waiting with anticipation, and they love this new game. It's deep, it's well balanced. And really well received by the community. So there's a deep, I guess you could say casual fan base, but there's a fan base for Mortal Kombat that goes beyond the tournament scene, and they're sort of discovering the opportunity to come to tournaments. And we sort of predicted around 120, and that's where we were hoping to hit, knowing that we feel that our event and the games overall have been a bit bigger than when we last had Mortal Kombat, where it hit like the 80 mark.
Yeah.
And certainly it hit 124. So that's a really great debut for Mortal Kombat 11.
And the other part of it as well is that we do have a lot of international players fly out from Japan, especially Korea for the Tekken players, things like that. Armada apparently showed up. Did you know that was the thing?
I didn't know. He just likes to hang out.
Apparently, randomly, a couple of days after registrations closed, Armada's shown up. So that, you know, like suddenly all these people have come just down to play casuals with Armada. Like,
yeah, right.
So it has become enough of a fixture on the international calendar that all of these things like, and obviously that's helped by things like Capcom Pro Tour, Tekken World Tour, things like that.
Yeah, I was asked why did we have an increase? Like, from the core numbers are that last year we had 870 competitor tickets sold.
Yes.
So that's individuals playing in fighting game tournaments. We have some other features, like we have the PC LAN area, we have the Splatoon area, Oceanic Squids. We have various side tournaments and activities with indie games and so on. But the very, very core of the event is those fighting game competitor tickets. 870 last year. We had 1,020 this year.
Yeah, nice.
Which is a huge milestone. It's 17% increase.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason is, well, we've been doing it for 11 years, and we've been doing it 3 years in this venue, this big format. And I think it's really a matter of its momentum.
Yeah.
It has its own momentum, almost no matter what we do. So we've got to keep feeding this beast.
And it has become that, like, obviously for many years, BAM was Battle Arena Melbourne. It's in the name. It was the Melbourne major. But it's arguable now that it's the Australian major. You know what I mean? Like, it's the biggest tournament in Australia. So. Yeah,
so, and everyone's rallied around that. It's great talking to the TOs from Ozhaddo in Sydney and our team in Brisbane and other people from around the country in New Zealand all come to BAM. It is our region's event. So it's really a great place to be at, and I can say I'm looking forward to Ozhaddo, so I don't have to do anything except play games.
And that will be nice for a change. So that, of course, is coming up in September as well. We've got Sunnyside up in August. So that's the August major in Queensland. Then September for Ozhaddo. I guess the big question becomes, Capcom's on this sudden big bend at the moment. They made a lot of money recently, a lot more than they have for a long time. They're being cagey about what they're doing for Street Fighter. What's your big prediction for BAM 12? What's going to be the secret sneaky pick you reckon for BAM 12?
I haven't thought about that too much, but yeah, I think if I was going to make a bold prediction, I'd say next gen Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
And you've put me on the spot, but I'm just going to throw it out there.
No,
it does make sense.
I think honestly that is the safest bet. Like, you played it safe, and I think genuinely I wouldn't be surprised if they announced. I think they can't do another Super Street Fighter. I think it has to be a Street Fighter 6 and rejuvenate the community.
The model. I mean, you say rejuvenate the community, but I mean, it has had a few doldrummy kind of aspects to it. But really, the Street Fighter scene has evolved a little bit, and we're looking at a time when players realise they have to actually lead their own community, and we're seeing that with Roth with his Roth Cup, and a group of players saying, well, I really like Street Fighter, and I want to make sure that the younger players have a community, and I want to lead it. So shout outs to Rups, Insomniac and Brewer, who have been doing that at Rambats and at our event locally. And it's still got 120 players. It still had top players from all around the world. Bonchan from Red Bull, Xian from Razer in Singapore, and and Gamerbee at the last minute coming through, and it was a fantastic tournament. So those high-level tournaments which have great international connections, particularly Tekken World Tour and Street Fighter with Capcom Pro Tour, I think will continue to have that cachet.
Cool. You've got 10 seconds. New people are watching. They're wondering what's your message for them to entice them to come to BAM 12?
No matter what you do, you're going to have fun.
Yeah, come down and have some fun. I think that's a pretty good way to go with it. Don't forget to check out more at CouchWarriors.org, as well as BAM Pass to Evo. That's another great initiative we have with Couch Warriors and BAM as well. See you there. Some of the games that's recently come out is Rage 2, the newest game from Bethesda Softworks, and Rage has something of an interesting history when it comes to its actual existence. The first one came out at a time where id forgot how to make video games, and that was a real bad time to like id games. Like the Wolfenstein from that era was just awful. You basically walk up and down the same alleyway and shoot zombies. Zombies and Nazis, I guess, is the same thing. And then Rage 1 came out. I was like, cool, now you got a boomerang and you can throw it. That's great, but that's a pretty singular element of Mad Max 2 that you're trying to riff on right there. And it sucked, let's be real. Rage 1 kind of sucked, but it was a linear shooter. Rage 2 is a very different kind of game. And if anything, it shows that it's been made by Avalanche Studios, the company that gave us Just Cause, they gave us Mad Max, lots of these great open world games. Because the game is effectively the Mad Max game and the Doom game put together. Rage 2, basically, I guess the 2 signifies 2 different parts being put together, because that's all it is. As soon as you get out of the car, which is very similar to Mad Max vehicular combat, and straight into shooting, it's pretty doomy. It's run and gun, you've got this power, you've got this ability, it's rip and tear, run into people, hit them. It's a lot of those same elements, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The game plays well enough. You have all the force powers, you have all these interesting things that it does to aid you in your shooting. I mean, you are usually a solo, crusader against all these different factions, so you don't have a lot of backup. So it's fine, and I guess probably the most encouraging thing I can say about Rage 2 is it's fine. It's actually a really good drought game, because in a couple of months ago, it would have really struggled because it just would have been overwhelmed by all these fantastic top tier games. I think having it kind of by itself at this point, it's going to snag a lot more sales as a result of that. And I did mention before that it's a Bethesda Softworks game, but it's technically not. It's a Bethesda published game. So I figured I'd bring in Matt to discuss one of our shared bugbears regarding the industry, and which of course is Bethesda published content versus Bethesda Softworks content.
Yes, okay, so I'm going to put this out here, and it's not going to get me many fans, but I said this before it was cool. I felt that Bethesda's published content is much better, far better than its developed content.
Has been for a long time.
And it has been for a very long time. But it's only come to fruition after Fallout 76 came out, people realized that maybe there's not really much to these kinds of games.
I think Fallout 4 had just enough kind of carryover goodwill from New Vegas and 3 that it was like, oh, it's different, but you know, I mean, it could grow. And then 76 comes out, it's like, oh, now they're just taking the piss.
Well, that's
like,
why Bethesda Softworks aren't letting Obsidian touch their properties anymore. But
look,
that's
and
just me.
It is that thing of. So I mean, this goes back, as far as I'm concerned, back to Hunt of the Demon's Forge. For a $50 game, that was great. Your favourite is, of course, Mikami's works, The Evil Within, or Psycho Break.
Psycho Break.
Yeah.
So to compare something to the ilk of Fallout 76 with something like The Evil Within and with Mikami's credentials, I find that a bit of a kick in the teeth.
It really is. Like, and I mean, on top of that, you've got to add the Wolfenstein games. Like, even if you go back to stuff like Wet, you know what I mean? Like, as dumb and derpy as it was.
Even
it was,
Sea Dogs, if like
Mate,
10 people in our audience remember Sea Dogs.
because you could tell they were trying. It sounds strange.
Yes.
Like, I would rather someone try something and fail than just be a by the numbers thing. And that's Fallout's fate. That's become Fallout's fate. Here is focus tested. People want more construction. People want more random guns. People want more this. It just feels like a focus tested mess. And I'm sure it sells more units, but if we're going the pure wanky argument of video games as art, well, it doesn't necessarily help that at all. And I think that's been the big revelation, like you say, for a lot of people lately.
Yeah, well, I mean, with a lot of the Softworks games, I mean, Flanders from The Simpsons was wrong. Like, you can pave the way and live on good intentions.
Yes.
And the latest output, especially from Softworks, like the Elder Scrolls Blades, Tamriel Unlimited, Elder Scrolls Online, Fallout 76, a lot of it just feels like focus-tested nonsense. Games that they don't want to make, but have been told to make. And I find that disappointing from a creative aspect, from a creative perspective even.
Yeah, and again, they need to go kind of the other side of it, where Avalanche have obviously been making kind of the games they want, but they've made a niche for themselves, kind of mercenarying for these different companies. So Mad Max is obviously at the behest of Warner Brothers. You've got Rage 2 being made for them for Bethesda. For a long time now that they've been kind of mercenarying one of their studios and then doing their own creative output through the other one.
Regardless of their quality as well, they will release like to make their Silver Linings Playbook games, they'll have to release a Just Cause every now and then. And even then, like, it's not really a chart topper, but it's still pretty decent and fun enough to play.
And good reputation. Like, Just Cause is one of the series that has really, even if as time's gone, it's gotten really flanderized, but I still think there's enough enjoyment out of a Just Cause game that it's worth still picking. Like, they do a good enough job with their open worlds. They give each of their games enough of a unique element that it's worth potentially having a look at them on that basis alone. And, I mean, Gen Zero is probably the white elephant in the room where it's like nobody wants to discuss that. And as much as it's like, I can see what they tried to go for and they failed, but at the very least, it's like, well, at least they tried something. And it'll be interesting to kind of go back now that they've kind of started fixing all the bugs and fixing all the issues and actually playing it. But as it stands, like, it's been interesting to see that they've gone down that Grin path. You remember Grin they made like Bionic Commando for Capcom, and then they suddenly, every game was made by Grin in some capacity, and then they just went defunct.
There are calling cards, so to speak.
You need to kind of balance that a little bit. And I guess probably the last point that I want to bring up to you before we have to go is, how do you feel about composite games like this? Like, it is so obviously two game ideas put together, and yet like, I talk about how much I hate focus testing, and yet I still don't hate it in Rage, because as much as anything else, it's like, here's these two cool concepts that were cool in their individual games. And we don't get those giant ion storms that we did in Mad Max, which was just terrifying. But we have these cool, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your final thoughts on that before we wrap up?
I feel it's good from a developer's perspective, because they still have the coding, the assets, the source code as well, in order to, I guess, to refine those experiences. So games like, I mean, Avalanche is essentially the post-apocalyptic game, or like a playground, like, where everything explodes. You jump into cars, you wreak havoc. Every game in that series, every game that they develop now has a grappling hook. There's those specific calling cards that they refine through their games. So you got games like Just Cause 3 that will have the grappling hook and the wing glider. Just Cause 4 will improve upon that with the weather effects. Stuff from Mad Max, the weather effects. And even a lot of the combats in Rage 2, for example, where they take on some of the criticisms that they had with previous games, and then they'll go and refine them in later games. And that's what I like. I like developers getting a second chance in different formats of their developing pedigree, I guess. It's really good.
Matt, thank you very much for your time. That is the end of another episode of New Game Plus. Do not forget to check us out at newgameplus.tv, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all those things. We're also on Spotify and iTunes for the little podcast that me and Dermy are doing, and watch that space. We'll be doing more of them. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Wiggles fingers, because they love them.